Hello and welcome to today's video. I'm Effie, this is What Effie Reads, and in today's video I thought I would talk about 3 of the books that are on my list of books that will self-destruct by the end of 2023 that I have now read. And whilst I'm talking about them, I thought I'd do a wee video of me putting together I keep calling it Lego, but it's not like official Lego. It's just like bricks play button. It's like the most random thing. Like YouTube sent out, I think they were called like high five emails. And all you did was like click a link and you could get this kit to make this fun play button. It's probably the only play button that I'll ever receive, but also I had a lot of fun putting together, so why not? So the 3 books that I'm talking about today are How Much of These Hills is Gold by C. Pam Zhang. We are also talking about Letters to the Lost by Brigid Kemmerer and Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Parris. So far, my luck with my self-destruct list, so I've now read 4 of the 10 books that are on my list. I'm pretty certain I'm not going to read the bottom 2 because the more I think about it, the less interested I am in reading them. But the 4 books that I've read are obviously the 3 books that I've already talked about, plus Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail, which was fine. I haven't rated a book in a while because I'm really behind on writing reviews and ratings and whatnot. But I would say that it was probably around a 4-star. It could have done more, and that's why it didn't hit as much as Delilah Green Doesn't Care. But also, I think that sometimes a book will be a 5-star because it hits you in the right feels at the right time. And speaking of 5 stars, we've got Letters to the Lost. This one really surprised me because I would say that I don't generally read a lot of YA contemporary. I think in general, I'm kind of moving away from YA age categorized books anyway, but in particular YA contemporary, because obviously they're going to be largely dealing with things that are more relevant to teenagers and I guess to an extent preteens. I'm not sure what age YA books are actually aimed towards. I'm going to say like 12 to 18, but don't quote me on that. I'm so bad for age categorizations. I always joke that I genuinely thought that the Wayward Children books was middle grade, and it makes me laugh now because I said that after having read Across the Greengrass Fields, which is probably the most cozy Wayward Children book. And now that I've read all of the series so far, including the upcoming dinosaur one, Not Enough Dinosaurs, not going to shut up about the fact there's not enough dinosaurs, but including the upcoming dinosaur one, I know that it's not middle grade. I'm not sure if it's technically adult or YA, but definitely not middle grade. Anyway, YA contemporary isn't usually my genre just because I'm in my 30s now, so it's not necessarily applicable to me. It doesn't make them inherently bad books, they're just rarely going to be something that I love and adore. But Letters to the Lost, oh my gosh, it was so good. So this was the number 3 book on my list. What I did was I read the first chapter of the 10 books on my list and I ranked them from the book that I most wanted to read, which was Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail, down to the book that I least wanted to read, which was Little Woodford. So Letters to the Lost was pretty high on my list of books that, based on the first chapter, I was excited to get to. Obviously, there were 2 books that I was more excited to get to, but I went into it with pretty high hopes. I also went into it knowing that my best friend, Shannon, whose channel is Head in the Books, please go check her out. She is amazing. She makes bookish content and cross-stitch content primarily, but she also does her own thing because it's her channel and she does what she wants with it. She actually gifted me Letters to the Lost because she just thought it was an amazing book and she loved it when she first read it. So she wanted me to read it. So I went in with pretty high expectations. And what I will say is I initially found it really challenging. I would say first 100 or so pages, maybe closer to the first 50 pages, it was a really difficult read because you are sitting so much in these characters' grief. Like the premise of it is that you've got these two teenagers who are in their final year of high school, and one of them's mother died maybe like 6 months ago. I'm not 100% sure the timeline. Like you know the date she died, but you don't like, oh wait, no, I do know the timeline. This book takes place in October. So what's that? 5 months ago. This girl's mother had died 5 months ago, and she has been kind of talking to her mother by leaving letters at her grave. And this guy who's on community service doing kind of gardening type things at the cemetery finds her letter, responds to it, and they start a discourse. So you are dealing a lot with these two characters' grief. I won't go into his grief, but it is very much like both perspectives. You are sitting in the grief, you are experiencing the grief. The grief is incredibly fresh. So it was a really challenging read from that perspective. Really well written, but really challenging. And then in the way that grief operates, you find that it goes in peaks and valleys for the rest of the book. So you'll find that you're not sitting so much in the grief, and then all of a sudden it can be like the smallest thing and you'll start to feel the grief again and it'll be really strong. But I thought that worked really well for the story. I also thought it was really well crafted. That one of the things that the two characters realized, I didn't even realize until the point that they realized. So that worked really well for me. And overall, it was just a fantastic read. Now, you'll notice that I've briefly touched on my highest priority and obviously my number 3, Letters to Lost. But I haven't talked about the book that I was second most excited to read, and that was How Much of These Hills is Gold. And that is because, unfortunately, it was a DNF. It's a very kind of gentle, no hard feelings DNF, but essentially, I don't read a lot of lit fic. I wouldn't say lit fic isn't my genre, but I don't read an awful lot of it. And it's beautifully written, well crafted. But I found that I was having a hard time because this is a book that is so character driven and not plot driven enough. And unfortunately, I thought the timelines and what we were discussing moved around too much, and I was having a hard time keeping track of everything. So basically, this book is very much focused on Lucy and Sam, these siblings who have lost both of their parents and they're trying to make a way for themselves in the world. But you also find out about their parents and their parents' backstory. And I just found it really kind of confusing the way that we leaped around all over the place. I also struggled with the language. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't think authors should, dumb down words or should just not put words in their native tongue or in the tongue that the characters are speaking in a book. However, I struggled, and maybe it's just that I'm a dumb bitch. Maybe that's it. But I really struggled to understand what these characters were saying, because they would say a Chinese phrase, but there'd be no context clues for what the Chinese phrase meant. So I'd just be sitting there feeling completely lost. And they'd have sentences where, authentically for the way that people are multilingual speak, they would jump around between Chinese and English. So I felt like I was losing half the conversation. I don't think that alone would have been a reason for me to DNF, but I just found that because it was so character driven and we weren't getting enough plot and it felt almost dreamlike. If you've seen any of my videos where I've talked about, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, it had the same kind of feel to that, where It's very ethereal. It was very short vignettes of story, and it was lovely to read for the first maybe 100 pages, but then I just found myself struggling. And every time I went to pick up this book, I wouldn't get more than a couple of pages before feeling distracted and feeling like I had to check my phone. And I just found that, unfortunately, I didn't care enough to continue it. And stopping with less than 100 pages to go is not something I would normally do. But also, at the end of the day, even if I wanted to read all 10 of these books on my self-destruct list before the end of the year, I probably wouldn't have enough time. So spending time reading those 100 pages of the book that I'm not hooked on just didn't seem like a good use of my time. So it's very much like a no hard feelings DNF, and I get why people might love it, but unfortunately it was a struggle for me. The final book that I'm talking about in this video is Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Parris. This is a semi-classic thriller. Like, obviously it's not classic, it's maybe like 10 years old, but I feel like anyone that's read thrillers has read it, and I'm just really, really late to the party. I went into it with relatively low expectations. Obviously, I found the opening chapter fairly intriguing. I wanted to know what was going on. I felt like there was more to the story than was being put forward. I thought Grace seemed very Stepford, almost too Stepford, and obviously Jack seemed incredibly controlling. But also, I am aware that the thrillers that were popular when this book came out are a very different beast to the thrillers that are coming out now. And considering I'm able to say that I have a favourite thriller author, and that's John Marrs, someone who does not pull punches, the bar was pretty high. And actually, I was really pleasantly surprised with this book. I did think that it was a bit more straightforward than I was expecting. I was expecting there to be, a bit of nuance, a bit of intricacy, but it was still a very interesting story, and it kept me gripped, especially towards the end, where it was almost like you had a time jump. So the past chapters ended up being literally just before the time jump, and then the present chapters ended up being literally just after the time jump, and that was quite interesting. When I say a time jump, it wasn't like that big of a time jump, but it was almost like the story seemed to be working up to this point and this event, and then we skipped over it so that we got a perspective either side, so that the information wasn't really revealed until right at the end. I did think that the very ending was a little on the weak side. Like, I would have liked even just 1 or 2 more pages to the ending to really solidify it and give some more information, because without going into detail or spoilers, I wanted to know what was going on in other characters' heads. Like, I get this book is from Grace's perspective, but Grace could have had a conversation or a more expanded conversation with other characters, so we could have seen what they were thinking and feeling about these events. But overall, I had a pretty decent time with it. And the next book on my self-destruct list that I need to read is From Blood and Ash, and I'm relatively excited to get into it. I've heard mostly positive things. I have heard some very definite negative things about it, but I would say overall people are pretty positive about From Blood and Ash, for it being very much of its genre, but then the series goes downhill from what I've heard. So I am excited to get into it, and as I say, it's the next self-destruct book I need to read, so we'll see how that goes. Be sure to subscribe if you want to hear me talking about that book whenever I finish it. But until next time, love you, bye.